Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new webinar from Clever Languages. We're really glad to have you here. That being said, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar, Strategies to Maximize the Understanding of Practices, Products, and Perspectives of Culture. We would like to thank, of course, FFLA for this collaboration, and we're really happy to have Linda Villadonica, as usual. To present her, she has a master's in education from the Monterey Institute of International Studies, now Middlebury in Monterey, California. She is former department chair and coordinator of the Advanced International Certificate of Education program at St. Augustine High School. She was recognized as Florida Teacher of the Year by FFLA, and she served as president of the association as well. She's an active presenter at local, regional, national, and international levels. She has active roles in the Florida chapter of AATSP as conference coordinator, state poster contest coordinator, and the editor of La Voz newsletter, and also recipient of the AATSP Distinguished Leadership Award. Thank you for being here, Linda.
Thank you. So let's get started. And as you check in, please let us know where you're from so that we have a good spectrum of people and we'll know where you are all from. What are we going to see today? Well, we're going to look at the Florida standards and benchmarks for Standard 6. And even though they are the Florida standards, I want everyone to know that they are based on the ACTFL standards. So the wording is very similar, if not exact. And then once we look at the standards, we're also going to look at strategies that we can use to teach this standard. And then we're going to talk about maximizing these strategies to the optimum level. And how do we maximize the students' understanding, learning, and engagement? This standard is a lot of practices, perspectives, and products. So the products part is easier than the other two, but we're going to talk about all three P's and see what we can do to help students learn those and internalize those things better. Okay, so the first question that we're going to ask you so that you are our participant is, what does the culture mean to you and how do you incorporate it into your teaching practices? Just a short answer, and you can use the either the QR code or you can use the URL down there. And we're going to give you about a minute to put in your answers.
Yes, if you have any problem scanning the QR code on the screen, I just placed the link on the chat so you can be able to go to the Padlet. Perfect. So our first answer is talking about how people from a culture do something and why they do it and what do they use, how it is different from our things, practices, and view. We also has what it makes us unique human beings. Also food, art, history, dance, art, unique linguistic practices. Also someone here who is learning to speak Spanish, not a teacher, but they know that language is a part of the culture. Also lifestyle that identify a specific community. So for example, this teacher provides reading, videos, and discuss it in different ways. Someone else also asked about their own culture and how everyone is different, its tradition, backgrounds, lifestyles. We have many interesting answers. I don't know if you would like to know some more or it is okay, Linda.
No, that's a good start. That's a really good start. Very good start. Okay, so culture, yes, is all of those things that were mentioned and so much more. I think we need the next slide, though. I think we can go on to the next slide. Oh, question number 2. What are the main challenges you encounter when incorporating culture into your language teaching? That's a biggie. So if you'll take a couple of minutes to do that, and we'll talk about that as well.
Again, you have the link in the chat in case the QR code doesn't work for you. Okay, perfect. We have some replies. So we have, for example, doing the lesson in the target language, making it meaningful and interesting to keep students engaged, time, of course, not being acquainted to the specific topic, finding effective resources and time to study,
Mhm.
negativity, I suppose that from the students,
Ah,
also too sensitive. And like always, time is the biggest. To go beyond a little look at this and get into deeper understanding, students don't always believe what you are saying. Also, yep. Also, appropriate cultural topic for my high school students, also engaging, meaningful. This person did the worry dolls this semester, and the outputs were bad comparisons and time and resources, of course. These are just some of the many replies we're getting.
okay, then good. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so there are 3 P's in culture, and I think you are all acquainted with these. There are the perspectives, which are the meanings, the attitudes, the values, and the ideas. These are the hardest to teach and the hardest for the students to internalize and learn. The practices are the patterns of social interaction. And then we have the products, which are the books, the food, the music, the games, the everything else, something you can touch and feel. Those are the easiest for you to teach. They are also the easiest for students to learn and internalize because they're tangible. Practices can also be tangible depending on what the practice is. Um, the perspectives are the hardest to teach and for the students to learn. And we're going to talk about each one individually here in a second. Next slide. Okay. So the Florida Standard for Culture is standard number 6 for us, and it is for ACTFL as well. It says that the student will be able to use the target language to gain knowledge and demonstrate understanding of the relationship among the practices, the products, and the perspectives of cultures other than his or her own. I would like to add that as a former teacher of almost, well, I guess over 40 years, at the beginning, when you first start teaching and everything is thrown at you, this is just like one more thing. And I agree that the time is really of the essence, and it's hard to fit everything in. And I totally get that. Um, as you become more accustomed to teaching and you do it time after time after time, day after day after day, year after year after year, it becomes a little easier because you can find little ways to sneak the culture in to whatever topic you're talking about. And it can be a grammar topic, or it can be a real cultural topic, or whatever it is. You can fit little snippets in here and there. And those are the ones that the kids probably get the quickest because they'll remember that it was interjected into something else that you're doing. So just from my viewpoint, the more cultural aspects you can give a student, the better. And also the more comparisons and connections you can make with the students, the better. So if you have a class full of students that are from various countries or various backgrounds, excuse me, then always try to bring their culture into the conversation so that they can see how the culture that you're teaching them, the Hispanic culture, in this case, is similar to their culture, whatever it is. If you have some Hispanics in your class, be they heritage speakers or native speakers, then that is easier for you because they can share with the class what their traditions are, for example. Um, Holidays make a great vehicle for doing that, for connecting one student with another and one culture with another. I just want to say that because I sometimes forget to say that, and that's important. We do. Okay, let's talk about products. There are tangible products that you can touch and feel and look at, and then there are the intangible ones. These, as I said before, are the easiest for us to teach as teachers and also for the students to learn and internalize. Toys, for example. Toys, every culture has toys. Every culture has toys. So you might start the conversation by asking them to think back in their childhood, depending on what grade level you teach. I taught mostly high school, so I would have them think back to their elementary school days, for example, and think of what toys they played with, or what musical instruments were around their house, or what foods they ate, depending on the topic. and just jot down a few things. Do a little mind map, not a mind map, what do you call that? A brainstorming. And write down some things. And then when you have two or three that are repeated several times, then you can start with those. And bring in toys from the Hispanic culture, or if you teach French, the French culture. If you teach German, the German culture. If you teach German, the German culture. Italian. Those are the main four languages that we provide books for, other than Spanish. So you can talk about the toys, and if you have a list of toys that the Hispanic children play with, then you can draw connections and comparisons, and you'll see that many of the games and toys that they play with here in the United States, students also play with there. They may not be called the same, they may not exactly be played the same way, but certainly you will be able to make a comparison. For the intangible, that's a little bit harder. We all dance. Every culture has a dance, but you can't touch it. It's something that you see and you watch, just like music, you hear it. That's a little harder, but the styles of dance, the types of dance, when people dance, why the dance was created, things like that, certainly can be connected to their culture in some way. Now, if we're talking about traditional dances of different countries, and my background is Spain, so if I were to talk about la jota aragonesa, for example, American students probably couldn't come up with a connection there because it's not like any American dance I've ever seen. But they might be familiar with the Irish jig, which is similar. And that brings in the history piece that the Celts settled northern Spain, especially the northwestern part of Spain, but in the north as well, that spread. And those dances are very similar. So there are connections that can be made, even if it's not a direct connection with America or the United States. Social, economic, and political institutions, you can talk about the government, the governmental system of a country, and they can look it up. Each student can look up the governmental system of one of the Spanish-speaking countries and see how they are like, how they're different, what their backgrounds are, etc. How did they arrive at that point? Speaking for Spain again, I mean, we went through a lot of different cultures before Spain became a country, a unified country. And then we still had different things. We had a monarchy, and then we had a dictatorship for a very long time. And now we're back to a monarchy again with a democracy involved as well. So those steps can be talked about and compared to other countries. They can certainly be compared to the United States. When the United States was founded, we were a monarchy, sort of, under the King of England. And then we went through the process of the Revolutionary War, et cetera, et cetera. So there are comparisons that can be made all the way around. Let's go to the next slide, please. Oh, and I forgot to mention, if you have any questions while I'm talking, please put them in the chat or the Q&A so that Sabrina can interrupt me and let me know that you have a question, and I will do my best to answer that question succinctly. Practices. Let's talk about practices. They are social interactions and behaviors. For example, when I was a young child, besides learning it at home, I remember my kindergarten and first grade teacher saying that when an adult entered the room, you had to stand up. And that was ingrained in us, and that was a social interaction or a pattern of behavior. That is taught still in many cultures. I think we're getting a little bit away from it here in the United States. From what I can see in my volunteering now, I volunteer at an elementary school, and I have to say that no child has ever gotten up when I've walked into the room. So I don't know if it's not taught anymore or if it's just kind of gone by the wayside. Another practice that is harder, I think, probably for kids to get is how to interact with a particular culture. And I think that's true of adults as well. When we visit another country, we tend to be a little more introverted, a little more cautious, because we don't want to step on anyone's toes. We don't want to cross the line of what is okay to discuss and what isn't okay to discuss. So that is, of the three that are listed here, that is probably the most difficult. And it's just a matter of doing homework and looking up things as best you can, and sharing that with your students. Next slide, please. Examples of practices. Rites of passage from childhood to adulthood. For many Hispanic countries, if not all, it occurs at around 15, 16. That's an easy demarcation in the countries that celebrate the quinceañera, for example. A girl changes from being a child to being a woman at 15. There is a similarity in Catholicism with confirmation. That's a rite of passage. You become a member, a full partaking member of the Catholic Church, or in the Jewish religion with bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. That's a rite of passage as well. So there are those connections you can make with your students. I know that we don't generally talk about religion in school, but I always said, as a language teacher, we can get away with a whole lot more than other teachers can because we teach culture as well as language. I'm going to skip around here. The social pecking order in Asian cultures, the elders are very much revered. You can draw a comparison to that with the Native Americans. The elders are revered. In the Hispanic culture, you find that the older people, the grandparents, sometimes the great-grandparents, are still the matriarchs and patriarchs of the family. So that's one. Meal times. Again, drawing on my Spanish background, it's a rude awakening for students and for adults too, to arrive in a different country and find that the meal times are slightly different. Pardon me. I know it takes me a couple of days to adjust my head and my stomach to Spain time, because breakfast is almost non-existent until about 10 a.m. And then lunch doesn't come around in the summertime, at least until 2 o'clock. And then dinner is maybe with a merienda in between. Dinner is at 8 or 9 o'clock. And that takes a little time to adjust to. But these are things that we can talk about in class. We can certainly elaborate on them, and the kids can start learning and internalizing. Table manners is another thing. I remember when, as a child, both my parents were born in Spain. So I had a bicultural household. And we were taught, one hand in America, you were taught that your hands were always in your lap unless you were eating. In Hispanic countries, and in many Hispanic countries, you don't put your hands in your lap, you keep them visible. So that's a marked difference. The place settings are sometimes slightly different as well. You don't talk with your mouth full in any culture that I know of. You don't talk with your mouth full. And there are other little table manners like waiting until everyone is served before you start eating. In some cultures, that's not necessarily true. So there are little things that you as the teacher will have to investigate. But if you're lucky enough to have several cultures in your classroom, well, you have a wealth of information, and use that information to your benefit. Next, please. Perspectives, like I said, these are the toughest to teach and the toughest to learn. And in today's world, it's even harder because you don't want to step on anyone's toes, and you don't. I don't know if I don't know where you are all from, but I think I can safely say that in Florida, we teachers really have to watch what they say and how they say it more and more every day. And so this one is becoming more and more difficult to teach. But if you know that it's talking about the meanings, the attitudes, the values, the beliefs, you sometimes have to dig deeper than just the surface to get to the perspectives. And that's why this one is the hardest one to teach and the hardest one to learn. It's you take a risk of stereotyping, but that might be the jump off point. When I was teaching at the college level, this was a lesson. I wanted to know what stereotypes they held about different cultures. So we talked about that first before bringing in the culture of the Hispanic world. And there were a lot of misconceptions about the Hispanic world, that we're all lazy because we take an afternoon nap. Um, and you have to dispel that. Well, in the summer, you kind of do because it's so hot and you work so many hours before then, and all of that. And that kind of shatters their stereotype, which is a good thing. We don't want stereotypes, certainly. Um, but at a college level, it's easier because they have been exposed to so much more. At a high school level, it's a little bit more difficult. And certainly at the elementary and middle school level, it's really, really difficult because they haven't experienced enough of life to hopefully, they haven't experienced enough of life to be able to stereotype anyone. Next, please. So these are some examples of perspectives, and I'm certainly not going to read them to you because I know you can read yourself. But if there's one or two there that stand out to you, please put it into the chat or the Q&A so that we can hear what perspectives are the easiest for you to teach, and by the same token, which are the most difficult for you to teach. I want this to be more interactive than it has been up to now. So if you'll just take a minute or so to say this is the easiest one and this is the most difficult one. Okay, I saw one that just really hit me right now. I just got back from a week in Cuba, and I had been there before, and it was good to go back and see how Cuba has changed in the last 7 years. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I had an 87-year-old lady with me whose dream had been to go to Cuba all her life. And so she saw it through one set of eyes, and I saw it through another set of eyes. And the person who wrote about the attitude toward bilingualism, it really hit home with me in Cuba because almost everyone younger than, say, 45 will speak English, some better than others, of course, and some in that 35 to 45 age range also speak Russian. And of course, they speak Spanish. So they place a lot of value in being bilingual or multilingual out of necessity or whatever it is. There are a lot of bilingual and multilingual people in Cuba. In Europe, you go to Europe, and again, the language they learn first is their own language, but then they add nowadays English, but it used to be French as well. So there's a tendency in countries other than the United States to be very culturally aware of the value of knowing at least two languages, and the more the better. I think, I hope that Americans are becoming more aware of the fact that we need to speak more than one language in order to be able to deal with people from other countries. I don't know that we're quite there yet. It's been an uphill battle since I was teaching. I started teaching for the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, and I taught students, military students who were going to a Spanish-speaking country. So they, of course, the military knows the value of knowing a second or third language. But I think a lot of kids still don't see the value of knowing another language. They figure, and maybe it's the me generation that says, well, everybody should learn English. Well, everybody else in the world is learning English. It's we, the Americans, who are behind. So anyway, that's my, my what do you call it? Spiel for today on bilingualism and multilingualism. I saw something else that I thought of. Importance of family, absolutely. Multi-generational homes. I remember as a young child going to my father's ancestral home, and there were grandparents, parents, and children living in the same household. Um, Sometimes it's out of necessity, but more it's out of the fact that we value our elders. Um, there was another one here that the belief that bigger is better. Yeah, well, hmm, having three grandchildren, I know that that's kind of a competition thing too. Anyway, I think I've exhausted that uh, um, to my way of thinking. I've exhausted this one right now. I can go back to it later if you'd like. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, this is a graphic that is really for those who are visual learners. I don't think there's anything better than this graphic. And there's a second one, but everything above the waterline are things that you can experience in one way or another. That you can it's you can touch it, you can feel it, you can hear it, you can taste it. And the stuff that's under the waterline are those things that are less tangible. And I know that I'm double talking, but I don't mean to. There are things that you experience. There are things that you believe. They are things that you um, can appreciate in someone else, but they aren't things that you can touch and feel and hear and listen to necessarily, although that might be a component of it. One of those things, for example, is, and I just saw it out of the corner of my eye, the concept of time. Concept of time. Because I was brought up here in the United States, I have a real sense of time. I like things done in an orderly fashion, and I like things done on time. And not to say that I don't get behind, because I do. I'm human like everybody else. But I have that concept of it's got to be in by 2 o'clock. I have found in my travels that other cultures are not quite that concerned with time. The mañana concept. And mañana can mean anything from tomorrow till question mark. Um, and that's not a stereotype. I mean, I have found it to be true, very true. A few years ago when we went to Spain, we wanted to have some work done on my father-in-law's home. And my husband called the plumber, the electrician, whatever it was, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'll be there tomorrow." Well, we were there another 2 weeks and he had not appeared. He did finally go and he took care of whatever it was that needed to be done. But that's the concept of CCC, mañana, mañana. And mañana, you know, can be anything. If a plumber here tells you they're going to be here tomorrow, you know, you can pretty much count on the fact that they'll be there tomorrow. So that's a big adjustment. There was another one here. Oh, facial expressions or gestures. Wow. You can think of very common expressions or gestures here in the United States that don't always translate in the same way. I can think of one that was very famous in my childhood, and that was what's his name? Richard Nixon, when he went around doing this in Australia. I don't know if you can see me. I'm holding up my two fingers. And that didn't mean the same thing as victory. It didn't mean victory in Australia. It meant something totally different, for which we have another gesture. So we have to be conscious of those things. We don't want our kids falling into traps. We don't want to fall into traps, for heaven's sake. So we have to kind of figure those things out. Next slide, please. This is a little one. This is a different view of the previous one that's a little bit more broken down, maybe, or maybe not. Maybe it's the opposite. Visible culture, things above the waterline. And then the invisible culture is the stuff underneath, the beliefs and the values, how you view the world, how you view society, how you view all kinds of things. And then the common humanity, the way we love and laugh and cry and seek dignity and meaning in our lives. Those are things that we feel or we think, but we don't hear it or taste it in any way. So that's maybe one way to approach teaching the 3 Ps in your classroom. that might be one of the best ways. Next slide, please. Okay, and we're back to this slide, the original slide of the three and how they kind of come together in a triangle. So let's go on, please. Okay, so we're going to just take a couple of benchmarks, different levels, and talk about them a little bit. This benchmark is from Novice Mid. Recognize common gestures and cultural practices and/or traditions associated with the target culture. What does this mean to you? What does this benchmark mean to you? And you don't have to write anything down, but if you want to, please feel free. What is or are the most important things in this benchmark? What do you have to do to help the learner reach this benchmark? And what does the student have to do? So it's sharing the load. You are imparting the knowledge and they have to internalize it somehow and prove to you that they've internalized it. So I want you to take just a couple of seconds and think about it because in the next couple of slides, we're going to show you examples from reporteros that you can use to teach this benchmark.
Okay, so for example, I think about how you react to someone sneezing. It becomes common practice in my classroom. This way. I am not sure what does this mean to recognize common gestures, Linda.
Well, I don't want to gesture, but let's see. If you think about the middle finger in the United States, that's a common gesture that is pretty much around the world now, but it didn't start out that way. So you need to be careful because it may not mean the same thing in another country. That's one that just really comes to mind. There are others in other cultures. A gesture. In many European, and not in many European, but in Italian, for example, you say ciao and you wave backwards because you want them to come back. And how do we wave in the United States? We wave this way forward, and it's like you're shooing them off or saying or doing with your hand. So that's another gesture that's not quite as offensive as the first. Kissing is a good one. We in Spain kiss on both cheeks. Other Hispanic countries, just one cheek. And I've never stopped to think about it, but I don't think there's an order whether you kiss on the right cheek first or the left cheek first in Spain. But I know that there are customs that go with that in France and Italy, I believe. And what do Eskimos do? They rub their noses. So that's how they greet.
Yes. Also, the way people greet each other, which we recently tried, bowing or hugs. Also, good point.
Hugs too. Yes.
What else? Thumbs up and down.
Oh, good one.
The okay sign, which is something else in Brazil. I knew that one, which is curious.
How do you do it in Brazil? How do you say? How do you gesture? Okay.
I mean, I heard this like in a curious fact, but apparently in Brazil, that gesture can be offensive, like the okay gesture.
Oh, like the
yeah,
you can't
exactly.
See me. Can you see me? I don't know if you can see me or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Or men kissing during greetings or celebrations. We have many examples.
We do. It's not odd at all for two Hispanic men, and I'm encompassing all of Hispanicdom here, to hug or even to kiss each other on the cheeks. That's not odd to us at all. It's not exactly accepted in the United States by the whole country, but it's very common for us to do that, for men to do that in our culture. Or a hug, or here it's okay for the sports guys to slap each other on the butt, but that may not be appropriate somewhere else. So just thinking about that. Okay, let's go on to the next slide, and we'll show some the intermediate low. Identify cultural differences in practice and perspectives that lead to generalizations or stereotypes. And we're not going to do this one, but it's always interesting to me to use what you have in class and I mean the students, use the students to help you teach this, because they can tell you, especially if you are as lucky as I have always been in my teaching career, that I had a multitude of cultures in my classes. So it was always interesting to me as a teacher to learn from them and give them the experience of telling us about something in their culture that was different from the American culture. And kids learn from kids, and I hate to say that many times they take that as gospel from another student that they would not necessarily take as being true, um, from me. And that's sad, kind of, but it's also good because that shows a little bit of community there. So that's always good. Next one, please. Identify similarities and differences in products across cultures: food, shelter, clothing. This one is very easy, I think, because we can have charts and all kinds of things going. You can find pictures of just about everything. It's interesting to do a food unit um, across kind of a world food unit, because there are many things that cross the lines of culture. If I think of a tortilla, the first thing that comes into my mind is una tortilla española de patatas y cebollas, y huevos, por supuesto. But in Mexico, what is a tortilla? Flour, corn. An arepa is very similar in the sense that it's round and like that. But what about the Asian cultures? They have the wonton wrappers that are not round necessarily. Sometimes they are. Ravioli in Italy that are um, the flat dough. So there are similarities out there that we can certainly uh, jump on to show how things have spread in the world. And that's a piece of history. You can bring the history into it and show how the trade routes brought things from one place to another. Talk about old world foods and new world foods. We in Europe, they didn't have the potato until they it was taken from Peru to the new world, to the old world. So there's lots that can be talked about. Shelter, the difference in shelters. Why are some houses built of blocks and bricks and stone, and why are some made of wood? Has a lot to do with the climate and the temperature. Transportation, the same thing. I saw tuk-tuks in Lisbon last summer. I saw tuk-tuks in Cuba this year. I know that there are tuk-tuks in Asia. I mean, those are things that you can compare very easily, and make it more interesting, and make culture come alive for the kids. If we're honest with ourselves, what grabs the students' attention the most in a language class is the culture. Yeah, tuk-tuks. Those are the bicycle taxis. Um, uh, how many kids don't want to have a food day? How many of you have ever heard kids say, "I don't want to do food day"? They all want to do food day. They all think it's tacos and enchiladas for the most part, but that's a great way to introduce them to other foods. Rice is everywhere in the world, for heaven's sake. Everywhere in the world has rice in one way or another. So those are things that introduce kids to more than just their little piece of the earth, and expand their knowledge and expand their minds, and hopefully expand their thinking of others in a much bigger and better light. Sorry if I'm being too political here, but oh yes, how rice is cooked. That's exactly right. That's a good way. Yes. How is it cooked and why is it cooked that way? Perfect. They enjoy Christmas around the world, but it's not always called Christmas, and it's not always the same time of year. Well, Christmas is, but Easter is not. For example, our Easter is tomorrow, but in the Orthodox churches, it's a week later. Why is that? I don't have an answer for that question, but I do have Orthodox friends, Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, who I know are celebrating Easter a week or two after we do. I've never really asked them why. Bad on me, but that's something too. Yes, Easter, the holidays. Always talk about the holidays in other cultures whenever you can. If you are lucky enough to have other cultures represented in your classroom, be sure that you include them because they are here in the United States. They're already celebrating the holidays that we celebrate. But what a wonderful thing to incorporate theirs into your everyday teaching. I know we're hired to teach whatever language we teach, but language is universal. So we have to broaden our horizons so that their horizons are also broadened. Next, please. This is for an intermediate high. So this would be juniors and seniors, levels 3 and 4. No, level 4, definitely not 3. Investigate practices and perspectives of past and contemporary life in the target culture through a variety of media. So you can bring in almost anything you can think of. They can do models, they can do dioramas, they can do a slideshow, they can do a podcast, uh, and compare past and contemporary. Things change because the world's changing. So they can compare the past and the present and then um, do a slideshow or a podcast. They can talk to somebody who's in the construction business, maybe. They can find somebody to do that. And about life and why we eat the way we eat, why we eat the foods we eat, things like that. Next, please. Compare and contrast cultural practices and perspectives among cultures with the same language in order to dispel stereotyping. Awesome. There are 21 countries in which Spanish is the main language or the national language. And while we are very similar in many, many, many aspects, we are also very different in some aspects. So it's always good to bring those similarities and differences together so that we're not stereotyped. And that's good in every culture. It's good to do that in every culture. Um, High school kids probably have some stereotypes already in their heads, depending on what their family is like and what they hear and who their friends are and what they read and what they watch and etc. So it's always good to dispel stereotypes. We don't gain anything by being stereotypical. Next, please. This is advanced high. So now we're getting into the AP, IB, Cambridge level of questioning. Discuss practices and perspectives of the culture or culture studied and describe how they are interrelated to the topics of philosophy, social issues, regionalisms, and traditions of cultures other than their own. So here we are talking about culture, but also talking about comparisons and connections and also interdisciplinary topics. So this is the hardest, but like I said, this is your IB, AP, and Cambridge level students and courses. Doesn't mean you can't start before that. In fact, you should start before that, and so that they have a leg up when we get to this point. I see that about the Day of the Dead. Yes, you're absolutely right. If you live in a Bible Belt, that's probably a big no-no. And I know that I'm going to run out of time, but I'm going to tell you this quick little story. I taught middle school Spanish 1 year, and that was enough for me. I'm not a middle school teacher, and I know it. I had gotten permission from the principal to do a Day of the Dead unit. She had told me when she hired me that she wanted me to do very cultural related things in my Spanish class with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And I was okay with that. So I got permission from her. I sent her all kinds of little articles and things about the Day of the Dead to explain what it was and how it came about, et cetera, et cetera. She walked into, and of course I had sent it out to the parents. They had a chance to say yay or nay. I was giving parents an alternative. At any rate, she walked into my class probably the second day or third week or second week of October. And I had put up around the room I had a ledge, and I put up the skulls that kids in my other classes had done in years previously. And those were the white skulls that they used to sell at CVS and Walmart that are they look styrofoamy, but they're not. They're more plasticky, and they can be decorated. And that was always a great project for the kids. So I had them all put up around the room. She came into my room and looked at me with like, oh my God, what is this? And in fact, she said, what are those? And I said, they're skulls for the Day of the Dead. And she says, well, you have to take them down. And I said, why do I have to take them down? And she said, because we can't have skulls in the classroom. I said, but this is part of the Day of the Dead celebration that we're having with the kids, with the tamales and the atole and all of that. And she said, absolutely not, absolutely not. And I had to take everything down, and I had to cut that lesson right out of my lesson plans, bearing in mind that she had approved it. Kids were disappointed, parents were disappointed. I just had to, pack everything up and go on. But you're right that some places do not want you talking about the Day of the Dead, even though they in turn will talk about Halloween. Maybe because they don't know the roots of Halloween. I don't know. I'm just saying that you need to really check, double check, and triple check that your principal will give you an answer and stick to that answer so that you don't get in trouble. So that's just another little platform. Be careful. Next, please. Okay, so now we're going to take you through Reporteros 1, 2, and 3. 4 is coming out this year, and Mapas 4, so that you have an idea of the kind of activities that are part and parcel of our textbooks. I think if you have not had a chance to look at them and feel them and touch them, I strongly advise you to touch base with the marketing department at CLET and get a copy so that you can look at it, because they are truly a wonderful textbook. Next page, please. Okay, from Reporteros 1, now this is going to be your novice level student. We've got a couple of activities that are very clearly listed as culture, and that's another beautiful part of this textbook. Things are headed so that you know what you're doing. This one is La familia es muy importante en Puerto Rico and in general in Latinoamérica. La familia es importante para ayudar, tomar decisiones y celebrar. Okay, so we're talking about the family and the family unit and all of that. That is part of our culture is steeped in family, and we know it. So there's a cultural comparison in the concept of concept of family similar in your country. You can change country for culture if you have a culturally rich classroom, and then you get different perspectives. This is something they can do in the target language, jotting down different words that they know. You can also have them do a little slide presentation. This is my family compared to a Hispanic family. You could do that. There's just a lot you can do with that. And that's just one activity. If you go to the next one, the next page, the cultura down here talks about the godparents and how important they are in our culture. Next one, please. I know I have to go fast now because I know we're running out of time. In Reporteros 2, culture is covered as well. And we talk about the quinceañera. So that's a big celebration, as we all know. It's not in every Hispanic country. Spain doesn't celebrate quinceañera, for example. But where it is, it's a very, very, very big celebration. Compare it to the Sweet 16 celebration in the United States. In some places, they still do it. The coming out, the socialite coming out, like in New York. You can compare it to the bar mitzvah and the bat mitzvah for the Jewish community, and see if maybe there is an Asian equivalent, and you can bring it to life that way. Next, please. Reporteros 3. We're going to talk here about, and I think there's a video that we're going to just play a little snippet for you. If we can do that now, that would be wonderful.
Sorry, Linda, I think that it's not really working, so we can.
Oh, okay. So we're going to just go on. Okay, so in this particular level 3, we're talking about Diego Velázquez and art. That's the cultural focus is art, and the meninas, and that's the big picture, right? So then you can have them listen to the video and talk, and there's somebody there who's going to that's a slip of the tongue. The video will have someone explaining the work, the art piece. So there are lots of components to our lessons that bring it all back to focus in on whatever it is that the focus is. Next, please. And I think that's mapas. Oh no, Reporteros 4 will be coming out, I think, during the summer this year. And then quinceañero with a no. Oh no, it's quinceañera. I'm sorry, that must be a typo. I'm sorry, Janet. It's quinceañera, but I don't know of a quinceañero. Maybe there is. I don't know. Next one, please. Mapas 4 is for your really advanced kids. Mapas has a series. It's Mapas 1, 2, 3, and 4. It is a complete series, and it is I would say for a pre-IB, pre-ACE, or pre-AP class, Mapas is wonderful. For students who are just starting out, I definitely would go with Reporteros. I would ease into Mapas 4 for IB, AP, and Cambridge. I would definitely do that. And here's one, Fiestas Populares en Honduras. Honduras is a beautiful country, rich culture, but very little do we know about it unless you're Honduran or unless you've been there. So this is a great way for the students to learn about Carnaval, which just happened. And then El Pueblo Garifuna, which is a very heavily cultural group of people. And then Easter, so you have, or Holy Week. So you have 3 different festivities, all on 2 pages that you can draw from. If you haven't ever seen a copy of Mapas, ask for a copy, because again, you will find a wealth of information in this book. Like I said, it's a little higher level. So, I mean, you can use it, certainly you can use it for whatever levels you want to, but this is more for me. I would use it for pre-IB, pre-AP, and pre-Cambridge, the IGST program. Next, please. And we have the same resources in French, German, and Italian, as I mentioned previously. If you teach one of those languages, please contact Colette and you can get copies of them. I saw a question about Portuguese, and I don't have any I wish I did. I don't have any contact with a Portuguese publisher. If anyone knows of anybody, please share it with us. I would love to know that. Mainly because I'm the conference chair and things for AATSP, which is Spanish and Portuguese. So I would love to be able to share products of and books and things like that, and other cultural aspects of Portuguese with my teachers. So if you have anything to share, please do. And next, please. Okay, and that is pretty. Oh gosh, we finished just about on time too. That's awesome. Wow. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Linda. That was great. Perfectly on time. Yes. So thank you, everyone. We're going to do the Q&A in a few minutes. I just want to take just a second to thank you again for being here. We would love to know what you loved about this presentation, where we could improve. So I'm going to leave now in here the feedback form. As usual, you can use the QR code that you can see on the screen, and I'm also going to place in a second the link as well. If you could give us a few minutes now and fill that, we would appreciate it. We will also send that on the email in case you have any issues. And also, I want to please invite you again to ask for a free sample of any of the books we saw, of course, Reporteros and Mapas, or any other that you like. I'm going to share that link right now again as well. Just
I'm going to
let
interrupt
us.
you for just a second, Sabrina.
Sure.
If you teach elementary, then I strongly recommend that you ask for copies of Alba and Gael if you have not already done so. It is a great book for elementary. Great book. Great set of books for elementary. Highly recommend.
Absolutely. Almiguel is a really great book. We have many amazing programs that you could check out. So please, if possible, you can always request a free sample. We will put you in contact with anyone you need. Just fill that out and, of course, let us know that you came from the webinar if possible. We're going to go for the questions. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to add them because we still have time. So the question we have so far is, how often would you teach culture in a week, and how long would you invest in teaching it?
Well, I would try to get something cultural in every single day, because there are a lot of cultural topics that we can touch on. Of course, it's easier if that's the topic of the day or topic of the week or topic of the whatever it is. But I think you can bring culture in every day from day one. I try to do that every day, something. And sometimes it's just a word like and I saw something about sneezing. When a child sneezed in my class, I would say, ay, salud. And they didn't know what that meant, but they got the point that we don't say bless you or whatever else people say in English. We say salud. And then they've realized that salud meant health. And so then that became a topic of somewhat of a little conversation about why do you say health and why do you never. And so that's a culture point. I also say ay Dios mío all the time. Ay Dios mío, ay Dios mío, ay Dios mío. And they began saying that with maybe with a small d, not a capital D, but any little thing that you can bring in. And sometimes you just have to let your mind go and see a bigger picture so that you can bring something cultural into the classroom as often as you can. You know, it could be 30 seconds, it could be 2 minutes, it could be a whole class period, depending on what it is. And have kids do some of the work for you. You don't have to do it all. Gosh, you don't have to do it all at all. I always started level 1 after the class size gets down to what it's supposed to be, and there aren't going to be any more kids coming or going. I always went around the room with a bucket and the names of the Spanish speaking countries in the bucket. So they would pick one, and that was their country for at least a semester. And then at the semester, we might change. At Christmas time, something that takes no time practically out of your classroom is I had a Christmas tree, and the kids would make Christmas decorations that represented the country whose name they had chosen. It got to be so popular that it wasn't just a Spanish 1 activity anymore. It became a Spanish 1, 2, 3, and AP thing. I wound up with 4 Christmas trees the last year I did it, so much so that they went out in the quad so that other students could enjoy them. So just whenever you can seize the moment to do something cultural, do it. Do it.
Perfect. Let's see what else. Okay, so far that's one of the only ones. There's another one which is perhaps on how, if you could give us more insight when there are, let's say, polemic or complicated topics. So for example, what can we do when we have a celebration which is maybe based on a religious part, or like Dia de los Muertos? So how could we find another way to approach this and being able to explore that in the classroom without having a big wall?
Wow. Other than that one middle school teacher that I had, a principal, sorry, except for that one middle school principal I had, I never had problem talking about anything in my class. I always though, clear it with the principal clear it with the department chair, and then by all means send a note home electronically to the parents and explain what you're doing and why you're doing it. So let's say we're going to talk about Christmas in Hispanic countries. Okay, we're sure to have other religions in the classroom. If you go at it from the cultural standpoint that you are building connections with your students to show them that in other places there are other ways of celebrating things, but that you encourage them to talk about their experiences around the same time frame. It may not be called, it's not called Christmas in Judaism. It's not called Christmas in Hinduism, but there are holidays or celebrations that are around the same time. Encourage those groups of students or that student to talk about their holiday around that same time. That also expands the students' minds. Acceptance is important for kids. It's important for all of us. Nobody likes to point a finger and say, oh, well, he's different or she's different. If we see that we are all people and we all celebrate something, even if it's not called the same thing. So God knows that even within our own Hispanic world, there are different celebrations for Christmas and different ways of doing things. Las Posadas in Mexico, Los Reyes, La Cabalgata in Spain. I mean, there are different aspects. So, but always clear it. I mean, cover yourself, please. Cover your bottoms, because in today's world, it's even more important that you do that. Talk to your principal. Make sure the parents are well aware, well in advance of what's going to happen, so that you can cover that. Even start off the parent night that I'm sure every school has parent night. Start off by saying that culture plays a very important role in language learning, and that you will be covering different cultural aspects of the language, and you invite them to share with you. So I think that's the key. Get the parents on your side before you start, because they seem to have a bigger voice every day. So as long as you've got them on your side, you should not encounter any problems. Ojalá.
Thank you very much. Yes. Okay. Another interesting question we have here. I'm going to quote directly and say what this person said. So I think I was wrong because I used to think that analysis was to choose one cultural product, for instance, fast food, the cultural practice related to it, having fast food for lunch, and reflect about the values related to that practice, the perspective. Why do Americans eat fast food so often, for example? So the 3 Ps are not supposed to be related to the same product or practice?
Well, they can be, of course. That's a perfect example of how they are all interrelated. But I think you're going to find that not all of them are. Political systems, for example, are, yes, there are practice and yes, there are perspectives to it, but they're not as intertwined as food and food practices, family and family units. So some things, yes, the 3 Ps work perfectly, and in some things they just don't. And they're not, I don't want to say they're totally separate entities, but they don't have that intertwining that some others do. It's just a way of life. And you're not wrong. You're not, absolutely not wrong. That was a perfect example for that.
Perfect. So far that's our last question. So again, Linda, thank you very, very much. It was very interesting.
My pleasure.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Just last to say thank you again, everyone, and I hope you can spend an amazing weekend and a great Easter. Thank you.